Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. We will be starting off with verse 23 of Surah Al-Imran. If you would recall, in our previous sessions, we had studied the initial part of Surah Al-Imran. So, just as Surah Baqarah has an introduction, and after that introduction, the Israelites are addressed and accounted for, and at the same time, their charge sheet, especially that of those of the Jews, was enumerated, and then the formal beginning of the surah took place. This, in a very similar way, you'll see that here also, this is basically the introduction to the surah, and at a particular instance, which will come today, the surah will actually begin, and it will start addressing the Nazarenes or the Christians of the times of the Prophet, and they would be also presented with their charge sheet, with their shortcomings, with their misdoings, in fact, regarding their responsibilities towards Jesus, and of course their own responsibilities towards the Book of God. But still, as we go along, this is the initial part of the surah in which a general introduction is given, and at the same time, collectively the Israelites are also told the way they behaved with the Book of God. So the verses start off with this: Alam tara ila allazina utu nasiban min al-kitab yud'auna ila kitabillahi liyahkuma bainahum thumma yatawalla fariqum minhum wa hum mu'ridun zalika bi annahum qalu lan tamassana an-naru illa ayyaman ma'dudat wa gharrahum fi dinihim ma kanu yaftarun. Have you not seen those who have received the Book of God? They are being called to the very Book of God that it may decide the differences among them. Then have you not seen that one group among them turns away, and in reality they are the ones who always turn away. The reason for this attitude of theirs is that they declare, the fire of hell shall never touch us, come what may. Yes, we can be inflicted with a torment for a few days. So once again, you see the charge sheet presented in a collective way regarding the Israelites is being studied, and it is under discussion. And the Quran has actually made this point that the people who were given the Torah, the people who were given the book that was revealed to Moses, their own attitude is something that was not up to the mark. So they are being called towards now this new book which is being revealed to them, the Quran. And instead of welcoming it, because the arrival of this book with the last messenger was something that was predicted in the Torah. So it was expected that they would be the first ones to accept it, and not only accept it, but profess belief in it wholeheartedly. But on the contrary, what happened, as the Quran says, يَتَوَلَّى فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ, a group among them, and if you would look at the way this construction is made, the word fariq is undefined. Actually, it means that a large part of those people, or a bigger group of them, it turned away. It did not accept this Book of God. And then this is a slightly threatening sentence, وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ, that they are but used to this. They are always evading the truth. And the reason for this is that they would say that the fire will only touch us for a few moments, maybe, or a few days, لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ, because they thought that they were the chosen people of God. They were the loved ones of God, the favored ones of God. In the first place, they will not even go to hell for any of their misdoings. But if ever they do, then it would be for a very short period of time. And this was something, as the Quran has said in its very next sentence, وَغَرَّهُمْ فِي دِينِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. In this way, it is what they have been fabricating that has deceived them in the matter of religion. So, of course, the fact that they'll go to the fire of hell for just a few days is something whose mention is not even found in the Torah. They have made it up themselves, and by making up themselves, they have actually led themselves astray. Because when you deceive your own selves, you concoct a whole mythology, you concoct a whole premise in your own, to reinforce you. The Quran says that this is absolutely baseless, and this has led them further away. And then, فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ وَوُفِّيَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. But what will happen when we gather them all for a day of meeting, which is sure to come, and in which every soul shall be fully given what it earned, and no injustice shall be faced by anyone. So again, this is a recurrent theme of the Quran, that they are not realizing what they are doing. They are trying to evade the book of God, and a very large section of them is continuing to do this. And the premise that they have concocted is that they don't need to believe in this book of God, and if ever they do something wrong, they'll not be called to account, they'll not be punished, and if so, for a very short while. So the Quran says, well, this is a grave misconception. They must remember that there will be a time when everyone will be gathered before the Almighty, and وَوَفِّيَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ. Everything will be accounted for. Whatever good or bad deed they did will come before them, and then they will realize that it's too late, and no injustice shall be shown to anyone. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. Their era has ended, so now pray you. Now this is an insertion, or this is something of a connection which is Ustaz Ghamidi has made in the text, and the connection basically is that now the responsibility is being handed over to the Ishmaelites, the followers of the Prophet, the Sahaba, and they are now being told that these Israelites, they are done for. They have been deposed from their position of bearing witness to the truth because of their misgivings and misdoings, and now it is your turn to carry on with the message of God and to bear witness to it before other people of the world. And as a result, they are being told that now it is the time that they should pray to God, that it is because of Him that they are receiving this favor. In fact, it's not a favor, it's more of a responsibility, and they should realize that it is God who is handing over this responsibility. It is not a very ordinary matter. It's not something that they should take in a very easy way. It's something very grave, something very, very serious. And at this occasion, then on this occasion when they are being handed over with this responsibility, they are being told to pray. And these words are sublime words. These are words which move us, and you might have heard them often. So it says, God, the sovereign of all sovereignty, you grant sovereignty to whomsoever you please and take it away from whomsoever you please, and you grant honor to whomsoever you please and humiliate whomsoever you please. All good lies in your control. Indeed, you have power over all things. So the basic premise here is that God is handing over this responsibility to them, and He will do so without any hindrance. No one can impede His intention in any way. No one can cause any hindrance. And I have explained this at a number of occasions as well, that this word man tasha or man yasha, when it says that He will do so however much He would like to, or He will hand over, or He will whomsoever He would like to have a certain responsibility. This expression of will, of course, at all times is qualified by His wisdom, and it does not mean in any way that what is being said is just being done without any accounting for being taking place. For example, whatever is going to be done will be based on His profound justice. So when He says that He will do so, and He will guide whomsoever He likes, and He will take away the power of being the true witnesses from a nation, it doesn't mean that He is going to do it out of any whim. It only means that no one can stop Him. And whatever He will do, as we all know, is going to be based on His own justice and His own wisdom. And that is why the Quran says, بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ, in His hand is all good. He is not going to do these things out of any revenge which is uncalled for, or any recompense which has no basis. It will be based on justice. He is goodness personified, and then the Quran says, إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, that He has all. Basically, this is the prayer expressed by the Ishmaelites at this occasion, or on this occasion, that you have all the power, O Almighty, and in your hand is goodness. And if you are now handing over this responsibility to us, then yes, it is a matter of grave concern that we must not flounder anything, we must not falter in this regard. And this power that you have is, of course, absolute, And if you have taken away this responsibility and given it to us, we will try to honor it. So this is how this expression moves from the Almighty towards the believers, and in their own words, it becomes a supplication. And this power is then expressed in the very next verse. تُولِجُ اللَّيْلَ فِي النَّهَارِ وَتُولِجُ النَّهَارَ فِي اللَّيْلِ وَتُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ وَتُخْرِجُ الْمَيِّتَ مِنَ الْحَيِّ وَتَرْزُقُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. We know that you make the night pass into the day and the day pass into the night, and know that you bring forth the living from the dead and bring forth the dead from the living, and you give unlimited sustenance to whomsoever you please. So basically, the words being expressed through the tongues of the believers, the companions, the Ishmaelites on that occasion, of course, tells us when we say, or when they had said, that you have all the power, you can do anything you like. And this is corroborated by the fact that it is you who makes the night pass into the day and the day pass into the night. And it is you who bring forth the dead as living beings, and living beings he makes you die. He makes them die. So this is something which God has the prerogative to. It is He who can only do it. And then, as you can see, وَتَرْزُقُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, that you are the one who can give sustenance and living and a lot of favors and wealth and riches to whomsoever He would like. So this repeated expression of whomsoever should not be of any misconception, that it is done something on the basis of God's own whim and it has no rule or no principle behind it. We know that, whenever it is said whomsoever, the basic thrust here, or the basic stress and emphasis here, is that no one can impede God, no one can stop God. When it is said He'll do it to whomsoever He would like, it just says that He will be able to implement His will. Obviously, His will be governed by His wisdom and justice. But as was the case, that the idolaters would think that their own deities will be able to influence God and win them favors, this is basically negated on such occasions. And also we know that it was not only the idolaters who were inflicted with these expressions, or these, I would say, confessions of polytheism. In the case of the Jews and the Christians as well, they too, especially of Arabia, if you look at Arabia, the Jews of Arabia were inflicted with a very grave form of polytheism, and that was that they regarded Uzair or Ezra to be the son of God, just as the Christians would regard Jesus to be the son of God. So they were very similar in this import, and they are being told that none of their deities are going to hold the hand of God if He wishes to implement His will. And وَتَرْزُقُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. This is the decision of God, and shall soon be declared for the people of the book. So let not the believers now make friends with these disbelievers, leaving aside the Muslims. And they should remember that those who will do this shall have no relationship with God except if you protect yourself from them the way it can be done best. God frightens you of Himself and does so that one day you have to return to God, and does so that one day you have to return to God alone. This expression, yuhazzirukumullahu nafsa, as you can see in the last part of this verse 28, has a very special significance, and we will talk about that significance in a while. But let's first start off with the opening words, which clearly tell that after this situation has become evident that these people are doomed and they have been found as enemies of the believers, and they have been they're open enemies. They would like to oppose, they have opposed the Prophet, and they are going to continue to oppose them. On this occasion, it is said that it is certainly not befitting for these believers, or the believers of the times of the Prophet, to befriend these disbelievers. So remember, this is something which is being spoken in a very specific context, and that is that people who have stuck to denying the truth, about whom God has declared that they are people who have stuck to denying the truth, it is about them that it is being said that they should not be befriended in any way. And one more thing which is even more important is added here as a qualification, and that is min dunil mu'minin, that if this friendship, even with these disbelievers, in spite of their animosity and their repeated breach of promises, in spite of that, if that friendship does not dent in any way the interest of the Muslims, even then it can be done. I mean, friendship with these disbelievers of those times, even if that can take place, the only thing is that it should not be against the interest of the believers. So this is a very important area of the Quran that has to be discussed, and I'll take a little more time to explain this part, because this has been a cause of grave misconception. And words like these and some others which occur in other surahs, like for example, Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu la tattakhidhul yahuda wan nasara awliya. O believers, take not the Jews and the Christians to be your friends. I mean, if I translate this verse or these words the way I have, it will sound as if all Jews and Christians, they must be abstained from as far as friendship is concerned. So remember, it is very important to realize, we've discussed this earlier on as well, that when the article alif lam, al, is appended to a common noun or at times a proper noun, as is the case with Yahud and Nasara, it actually refers to a specific category. So on that occasion too, and here also, these are people against whom, and in fact to whom, the truth had been unveiled in its ultimate form, and they had no excuse to deny it. And as a result, the Almighty said that now you can call them as disbelievers, and now you can dissociate yourselves from them, and they are no good. And dissociation again is something, if it is not against the interest of the Muslims and the believers, then it should not even take place. But if it has to take place, then remember, this is basically a punishment from God for denying the truth. So as far as today's Jews and Christians are concerned, this verse and similar verses which have the same import do not address them. They address the disbelievers of the times of Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him. They were the ones to whom the truth had been unveiled, the truth had been conclusively conveyed, and about them it was the Almighty who conveyed to His own Prophet that now they have left they have absolutely no speck of belief in them. They are not guilty of any sort of misunderstanding. They are deliberately, intentionally, in spite of knowing the truth and knowing the truth to be the truth, they are denying. So these are the Jews and the Christians which the Quran talks about. And when it says Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu la tattakhidhul yahuda wan nasara at other occasions, so a more precise and a more accurate translation would be, believers, take not these Jews and these Christians which were standing right there in front of them, about whom the Almighty had communicated to the Prophet that they have now intentionally denied. It's not out of any misunderstanding or lack of understanding, or maybe lack of the message being received by them is the cause of their denial. No, they are fully conversant of the truth. They know the truth to be true, and they fully acknowledge it, but out of arrogance and other vested interests, they have stuck to this denial. So this is something that has to be understood. Otherwise, whenever people will read the Quran, they will jump to this false conclusion that Jews and Christians cannot be befriended, which is of course not the purport of the Quran here. It then says, "Kul in tukhfu ma fi sudurikum aw tubduhu ya'lamhu Allah wa ya'lamu ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir." Tell these Muslims, O Prophet, whatever is in your hearts, whether you conceal it or reveal it, God knows it. And He also knows whatever is between the heavens and the earth, and God has power over all things. So one thing also that we as students of the divine message must understand, that wherever these words occur, Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu, they are not always referring to true Muslims or to Muslims who are really well grounded in faith. The word Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu is equally applicable to hypocrites as well, because remember, they were posing to be Muslims, and the Quran has not yet exposed them. So they were still being counted amongst Muslims. They were counted amongst Muslims and they were regarded to be Muslims. So they were addressed as Muslims. So Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu, if you look at the way the whole discourse progresses, you'll understand that this address is towards these weak Muslims who were bordering on hypocrisy. They are being told that, remember, if you are going to in any way violate this command which was given above, that you should not take these Jews and Christians or these people against the interests of the Muslims to be your friends. But if you violate this, then remember, if you do this in your heart, if you profess something outwardly, but you have a different view in your heart, don't think it's going to go unnoticed in the sight of God. He knows what is in your hearts, and of course, He knows what you profess outwardly and publicly. He has full knowledge of all things, and His knowledge is not just confined to what you think and what you express. He knows everything in the heavens and the earth. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Every single thing in the heavens and the earth is in His knowledge. And then, وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. He has power over everything. God has power over everything. This is a recurrent theme of this surah, and on other occasions you'll find this to be a very commonly expressed motive of the Quran, that God has power over all things. He is the one who is controlling, He is the one who is directing the affairs of this universe, and it is this power actually which makes us have that complete trust in God, which makes us realize that because of this power, He is our protector. If He is going to protect us, the amount of power He has, there is no one who can stop Him from that protection. And if because of any trial He would like to forgo that protection for a while, then again it is He who is going to do it on His own accord. No one is going to stop Him. He's going to do it because of a certain expediency, because of a certain reason. So no one can stop Him. So this expression of power on the part of the Almighty, which is expressed time and again in the Quran, is meant to give us that assurance, to create in us that trust that the support of God, the power of God, and the way He can deal. He is someone who can create causes. He can create something which we don't even imagine, means and resources, because you see, we as human beings, we are always thinking of means and resources, and in the absence of means and resources, we say, well, this thing cannot happen. But they are time and again reminded that, remember, it is we as human beings who always build upon means and resources. For God, it is not like that. He is the creator of those means and resources. So therefore, we have to trust Him. We have to bank on Him. We have to trust all our problems, our own personal shortcomings, and express them towards Him, because it is He who is going to support us in these moments of distress. So, وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ يَوْمَ تَجِدُ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ خَيْرٍ مُحْضَرًا وَمَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ سُوءٍ تَوَدُّ لَوْ أَنَّ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَهُ أَمَدًا بَعِيدًا وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ وَاللَّهُ رَءُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. The day when each soul will be confronted with the virtue it did and also with what evil it did, on that day it will yearn for a long interval of time should stand between it and this day's presence. This is the counsel of God, and God frightens you of Himself, and frightens you because God is compassionate towards His servants. A beautiful way to express the fact that if God frightens you of Himself, then remember this warning from Him, this threat from Him is something which has the other element so dominant in it, and that is وَاللَّهُ رَؤُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. He is very compassionate towards His servants. So this compassion is something which makes Him do this. He makes people realize that if they are going to do something which is not up to the mark, something which their own conscience, their own nature does not vouch for, it is something that will degrade them in the eyes of their own conscience, then remember, God is going to take His account for them. And remember, if He tries to scare you of Himself, it is not that He is going to scare you because He's someone horrible. No, this is something that is not befitting for you yourself to do. And because of this, God is compassionate. He's Ra'ufum bil ibad, which means that He is extremely affectionate to His servants. And it is this part of His affection which at times manifests in His anger as well. And again, a very, very subtle way to express this fact that His anger also arises from His affection. His anger arises from His love towards His creatures. And this is something, viewers, you would realize is the case with all of us as well. As parents, as siblings, as children, when we are angry towards someone, it is basically that expression of love which takes this extreme form at times. And it is this love which has to be present for us to be angry, because we would not be angry with people whom we don't love, especially in the way that God is expressed here. قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم قل أطيعوا الله والرسول فإن تولوا فإن الله لا يحب الكافرين. Tell them, if you love God, follow me. So the Prophet is being told that if you would like to tell them what to do, then tell them, if you would like to love God, then you have to follow me, which means they have to follow the Prophet. God will love you and forgive your sins, and God is forgiving and merciful. So following the Prophet, obeying him, and doing what he says is something which will endear them to God, which will make God love them, which will make him forgive their sins. And that is the only sole one-point agenda which the Quran has always expressed in one form or the other, that basically you have to follow the Prophet, because on many occasions the Quran has said, "Man yuti rasula faqad ata Allah." The person who follows the messenger, he in fact follows God, because God, it is on his behest that the messenger has brought the guidance to them. And if they are obeying that messenger and that prophet, they are in fact obeying God. So that is what this verse also expresses. And then obey God and his messenger. Then even if after this they turn away, tell them that God does not like such disbelievers. So Atiullah wa Atiur Rasul, of course, expressing the fact that if they would like to follow the guidance, then remember that the source of this guidance is God himself and the Prophet. He is standing right in front of them as God's envoy, as his instrument of justice, as someone who is his representative. And therefore they have to understand this, that if they turn away, then remember God does not like such disbelievers, because in this case they would be doing so intentionally, knowingly, and deliberately. So on this verse, dear viewers, the initial part, or you can say the introductory part of the surah ends, and it is on the very next verse, which we'll study after a while, after we take questions, that the surah actually begins. And as you will see, as we will see also when we study that part and right onwards, that it is now that the Christians are directly addressed and their charge sheet is presented before them. So once again, the similarity between Surah Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, and we have discussed this earlier on, that this similarity actually makes them to be pairs to one another. They are counterparts. So the difference being that in Surah Baqarah, the Jews are called to account by presenting their charge sheet before them. And in this surah, it is the Christians, although Jews are also there, but in particular, the Christians they're called to account, and they are told that this is your charge sheet. It is as if they are being told that it is because of this ignominy that they are facing, of being deposed. It's not without any reason. If God is granting sovereignty to the Ishmaelites, it is not because of any injustice. It is because of a whole history of 2,000 years in which they have continued to flounder the message, and in fact it goes well beyond that as well, and that is what has made them ineligible for this position. So viewers, before we go on to actually begin the surah, which starts from verse 33, if we have any questions, or if you have any questions regarding the part that we have studied today, please raise them.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. The participants do not have any questions right now, so if you want to continue, I don't see any hands raised, so you can continue with the session if you want.
So we can continue with the next part. So now remember, this is now the real opening. The real starting point of the surah. The introductory part was leading to this part in which the Christians are now called to account. Their charge sheet is being presented, or is presented one by one. But before the charge sheet is presented, of course, some part of their history has to be narrated to them, and they are being told how matters were. And one of the reasons where the Quran narrates such history, as you will see if you compare the Quran, the similar portion of the Bible, that on many occasions it is correcting the Bible, or it is correcting the biblical history, because we all know that in the text of the Old Testament and in the text of the New Testament, because we don't have their original translations, there are a lot of discrepancies, in the sense that in the absence of the original text, the translation is something in which the interpreters, the translators themselves have added their own understanding, and it's not out of any malpractice, or it's not any it's not any ill intention in this way, but the fact is that at times you misunderstand things and you think that, well, this is how it should be, and other people then come again and correct your understanding by saying that no, this is not how it should be. It should be like this, because you see that you don't have the original text, so you try to make sense of the translation. Also, on many occasions, if you study the Old Testament and the New Testament, you'll find that historical sources which were meant as an explanation, or maybe something which were recorded to give you that background, so to speak, they have been amalgamated or maybe accommodated, if that is the right word, in the text. And instead of being separated, it's like the tafsir of the Torah being intermingled with the text of the Torah. And of course, not the text, but the translation of the text. So had the original words survived, we could have very easily deciphered that. But in the absence of that, of course, now what has happened is that the Quran continuously corrects their history. And as we'll see, we go on, the Quran has done that in Surah Baqarah, when we saw that how Saul and we know the Prophet in his times, the way he had accomplished his task, and the way the whole incident was mentioned in the Quran was entirely different from how it was mentioned in the Old Testament. So the Quran corrected that. So it's not just merely a statement of history which the Quran does. It corrects that, and we will see this one after the other. So, Inna Allah astafa Adama wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahima wa ala Imrana ala al-alameen zurriyatan ba'duha min ba'd wallahu samiyun alim. These people of the book want to argue with you. No doubt, God, whilst giving preference to Adam and Noah, Abraham's family and Imran's family over all nations. So I have already explained this, that Imran was the father of Mary or Maryam, and he was the maternal grandfather of Jesus, and he has been specifically mentioned amongst Abraham's family, just as at times we need to specifically mention something after the general, whilst the general, that specific part is part of the general. So what is being said is, just as Adam and Noah were given this responsibility, the Almighty on a certain occasion also chose the family of Abraham, the progeny of Abraham, and amongst that progeny, of course, was the progeny of Imran, or the maternal grandfather of Jesus as well, for this purpose. And that is how the Quran says. And it says, over all nations chose them to guide these nations. So the history that is being narrated to them is that Adam and Noah, in their individual capacities, they were appointed as witnesses to God's truth, and they conveyed this truth to people. So just as God appoints individual personalities, He also appoints a whole group of people for this purpose, and He did so in the form of Abraham and Jesus, and their own progeny. And the word al-alameen, of course, is not, as might be the sound of it, might think that, well, it's like saying that all the worlds, that is what is being implied here. So I have discussed this earlier on as well, that on many occasions, and this is a very specific feature of the Arabic language, that a plural is not always enumerating multiplicity in relation to a singular. And this is something that we know from our own language, that normally in the English language or the French, German, even in the Urdu language, the plural is always expressing a number which is more than the singular. But this is not the case with Arabic and Hebrew. In Arabic especially, you'll find out that plurality also denotes vastness. So if you recall, the Quran has the words mashariq. The word mashriq, of course, refers to the east. But mashariq, there are not several easts. This plurality actually expresses the vastness of the east. Similarly, you'll find the Quran saying zulumat. It's darkness, and you'll find most translators translating it as darkness. And the fact is, you cannot have a plural of darkness. So what is being intended here is the vastness, the huge expanse of darkness that is being implied by the plural zulumat. So in a very similar word, in a very similar vein, the word alameen is not expressing a number of worlds or a number of universes. It's only expressing the vastness of this own world. So, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, the same structure is there as well. It's not being said that gratitude is to the Lord of all the world that He has created. That's not the occasion there. Basically, it's referring to the fact that this world, this wide world, this huge world, this profound creation, He is the creator. So, similar is the usage of Alameen here as well. And then it says, ذُرِّيَّةً بَعْدُهَا مِن بَعْدٍ وَاللَّهُ السَّمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. They are the progeny of one another, and whatever they have been saying and doing, God is aware of it, because God hears all and knows all. So the point which this verse very effectively makes as the starting point of the history of the Israelites, and of course it goes down to the Nazarenes or the Christians, that remember that just as God has chosen personalities, He has also chosen whole clans and whole tribes and whole descendants for this purpose. And Abraham is the patriarch, the grand patriarch, and amongst his clan also there is another person, Jesus, who was, of course, we know, the last of the Israelite prophets, and he has been pinpointed here. And we now will see how, as the Quran progresses, his mother Mary or Maryam, she is discussed, and how she was wishing for someone. And of course, much before that, we know that how before even that happened, as far as Mary is concerned, the misconceptions that they had, which made them regard him or her, we can say, to be the mother of God, will also be coming into discussion. So it says, "Is qalat imratu Imrana Rabbi inni nazartu laka ma fi batni." So we are now talking about Mary's mother, who was Imran's wife. So it says, "Remind them of the incident when Imran's wife prayed, 'Lord, I have dedicated to your service this child which is in my womb, by relieving it of all responsibility.'" So the Arabic is, "Rabbi inni nazartu laka ma fi batni muharraran fataqabbal minni innaka antas samiul alim." So muharraran means by freeing that child of all responsibilities, all worldly responsibilities. I would like my child to be dedicated to you. So remember, Imran's wife was expecting a male child, because this is how things were in those times, that they would dedicate their male children at times to God, which meant that they will do the service to God, they will not be involved in any worldly affairs. And this is precisely the vow which Mary's mother, or the wife of Imran bin Matan, his full name is Imran bin Matan. So that is how she thought that now that she's pregnant with this child, of course not knowing what the gender of that child would be, but she was naturally expecting that she would be given a son, because normally it's the son who who works for the cause of God. For example, he would be typically in the temple or the worship place. He would look after that worship place, and as we can see, he was the keeper of that place. And because it was the men who would be doing that, so Mary's mother, the wife of Imran, she thought that, well, she would be blessed with a baby boy. So now the Quran says, فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا قَالَتْ رَبِّ إِنِّي وَضَعْتُهَا أُنْثَى وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا وَضَعَتْ وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. Then when she delivered the child, she said, "Lord, I have given birth to a daughter." And God well knew what she had delivered, and said, "That boy would not have been like this girl." Again, a beautiful expression on the part of the Quran. If you can see and recall, when I was teaching you the course on the stylistics of the Quran, we did come across a very, very common feature of the Quran, which is the parenthetical sentence, which is an on-the-spot comment on a previous part, and then the discourse connects from the previous verse as well. So, "Wallahu a'lamu bima wadat" is a parenthetical sentence. This part, "Wallahu a'lamu bima wadat," which you can see in the translation, is represented such that it is preceded by a dash, and subsequently we have a dash, just to make us realize that this is a parenthetical sentence, and this is basically a comment on what is said earlier on, and the discourse is actually connected from "I have given birth to a daughter too," and "that boy would not have been like this girl." So basically this intermediate sentence is just an insertion. Otherwise, if you look at the Quran and the text, the connection would be, then when she delivered the child, she said, "Lord, I have given birth to a daughter. That boy would not have been like this girl." So the implication is that as far as the child is concerned, Mary was disappointed, to be honest. She thought that she would be given a boy, because only a boy can do these chores. And little did she know that the girl that she has been given and been blessed with is destined to become one of the greatest women of all time, the way the Quran has expressed her on other occasions. And we will see that in a few verses as well as it goes down, as the discourse progresses. And said, that boy would not have been like this girl. Well, this is what I have now. So basically, it's her own comment, and she's saying that, well, I wish I had been given a boy, and now that I've been given a girl, I mean, that boy would not have been like this girl. I mean, he would have been much more appropriate for this task. That is what was in her mind. So, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى وَإِنِّي سَمَّيْتُهَا مَرْيَمَ وَإِنِّي أُعِيذُهَا بِكَ وَذُرِّيَّتَهَا مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. And I have named her Mary, and I give her and her progeny in your refuge from Satan the accursed one. So this is how Mary is expressing, Mary's mother is expressing herself before the Almighty, that now that she's been given a baby girl, she's not going to go back on her vow, on her dedication. Yes, she's still going to dedicate the child, even if she's a girl, thinking that, well, if it's not a boy, well, it's fine. At least she has a child who she can dedicate. So these were her feelings. Now, the Quran says, فَاتَّقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا, which means he said in amazement, he asked in amazement, that is, of course. So basically, what is being said here is that these were her feelings. This is how Ustaz Ghamidi has connected the previous verse, because the fact is that she was, sort of disappointed, and this disappointment did not actually break her promise, and she still said, okay, if I've been given a daughter, okay, I'll still devote her for the cause of the Almighty, and I'm going to name her Mary, and I'm going to give her into your refuge, O Lord Almighty, from the curses of Satan. فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا, which means, however, her Lord graciously accepted that girl, and he made her grow into a goodly child and made Zacharias her guardian. So Zacharias was basically he belonged to Aaron's family, and amongst the Levites we know that he was responsible for the temple, and especially his clan was given this job to look after the temple. And Zacharias, we know he was the paternal, he was her basically paternal uncle. So about him it was said that you are being given the custody or the guardianship of this child, and he made her grow into a goodly child and made Zacharias her guardian. So Zacharias or Zachariah, he was the guardian of Mary. So it says وَكَفَّلَهَا زَكَرِيَّا, which means that God made Zacharias her guardian. كُلَّمَا دَخَلَ عَلَيْهَا زَكَرِيَّا الْمِحْرَابَ وَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا رِزْقًا قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا قالت هو من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. So remember, this was a very common custom in the times of prophets of God, and they would be looking after the temple, and the temple itself, we know, was a place in which people would dedicate themselves. They would sit in seclusion, much in the same way as we have itikaf. We know that is something which prophets of God and righteous people often did. And this is how Maryam or Mary had also, we know, that she also confined herself to some abode within the temple. And it says, Anna laki haza. And whenever Zacharias, who was her guardian basically, whenever he would visit her, he would find a lot of wisdom, a lot of things that she would say in a way that would make him realize that, well, she is under the protection of God, because the way she would speak would be something that would actually corroborate this fact. One thing that we might need to understand here is that the word rizq in the Arabic language does not merely connote or refer to fruits or to sustenance. It also refers to divine sustenance. This is a very common use in ancient scriptures and ancient languages, and in the Quran also, that even divine guidance is called rizq. And it is specifically here also that the Quran has used this word in the sense that Mary would have this rizq with her, which means that she had this divine guidance and this divine expression which would exude from her and would make Zacharias realize that, well, this is not an ordinary woman, she's not an ordinary girl. قالت هو من عند الله. So he would ask her, where did you get this wisdom and where did you get this sustenance, which is this divine sustenance, from? And she would reply, قالت هو من عند الله. This is from God. I have received this from God. إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. Blessings of your Lord were for that girl. Truly God gives without measure to whomsoever He desires. So now we find at the same time Zacharias being inspired. He thought, well, if this is the offspring which is born to Mary's mother, then what good, he could not have been a better witness to such an offspring. And that is something which inspired him. And remember, we know from other parts of the Quran also and from the Bible also that until that time Zacharias was childless. He did not have a child. And when he saw Mary being born to Imran bin Matan's wife, he thought that, well, he too should pray to God to grant him such a child. So hunalika da'a Zakariya rabbah. It was at that instance that Zacharias called out to his Lord and prayed, Lord, grant me of your own grace pious offspring like her. Rabbi habli min ladunka zurriyatan tayyiba innaka sami'ud du'a. Surely you hear the prayers of your servants. So basically what is being said here is, Rabbi habli min ladunka zurriyatan tayyiba. Oh Lord, just as you have given Imran bin Matan this beautiful child, please also give me someone who could be my heir after me, as we know from other instances in Surah Maryam. Of course, that is a more detailed account of Zacharias and of his son John, who is also called Yohanna. So قال رب هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة إنك سميع الدعاء فنادته الملائكة وهو قائم يصلي في المحراب أن الله يبشرك بيحيى مصدقا بكلمة من الله وسيدا وحصورا ونبيا من الصالحين. So remember, I was talking to you about the fact that history is a very important thing that has to be at times corrected. And it is here the Quran is actually telling us that Yohanna, or John, who's also called John the Baptist, he was a forerunner to Jesus. And it was he who actually foretold the arrival of Jesus in a very, very vehement way. So if you look at the Bible, you'll find John the Baptist making this announcement that Jesus is about to arrive. So basically, it is about him. Once Zacharias was blessed with this child, the Quran says that it was at that moment when Zacharias prayed for the child that the angels on behalf of God gave him those glad tidings that, well, if you have asked for it, then remember, you will be granted your wish. And now God is actually giving you the glad tidings of the arrival of your child Yahya, and he would be someone. Who would be he? Actually, the Quran says, أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُبَشِّرُكَ بِيَحْيَى مُصَدِّقًا بِكَلِمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. So God gives you glad tidings of John, who shall confirm a word of God. Of course, referring to Jesus himself. He would be confirming a word of God, referring to the fact that he will be predicting the arrival of Jesus. He will be a leader, and that we know from the Bible. If you look at the Gospels, that he sure was a leader. The way he would speak, the way he would address people, he had that magnificence, that majesty, that splendor about him that would make him sound and come out as if he was a born and a natural leader. So the thing is that he will be an abstinent person and a prophet from among the righteous servants of God. So just as Jesus never married, we also know from biblical history, John or Yohanna, or Yahya in fact, he never married. He never married. And the reason being that he was in a situation in which he had no time to actually raise a family. He was predicting the arrival of Jesus. For this, he had dedicated himself. He was doing so by going to various instances and places that now the person is coming who's going to be the last of the Israelite prophets. If you don't wake up even after him, then you are doomed. So that is what the Quran says, that he was an abstinent person. He had nothing to do with the pleasures of the world, and he had dedicated himself for a forerunner and an announcer of Jesus himself. And he was a nabiyyam min as-salihin. So he was a prophet from among the righteous servants of God. قال رب أنى يكون لي غلام وقد بلغني الكبر وامرأتي عاقر قال كذلك الله يفعل ما يشاء قال رب اجعل لي آية قال آيتك ألا تكلم الناس ثلاثة أيام إلا رمزا واذكر ربك كثيرا وسبح بالعشي والإبكار. So now, as the story proceeds, it is said that he said, in this manner God does what he pleases. And he, of course, John, or he was born in a way that, again, this was something that is brought forward because he was a forerunner to Jesus, someone who predicted his arrival, someone who had to shake and jolt people that now that last of the prophets of the progeny of Abraham is arriving. So you must take account of yourselves. And he says, قَالَ رَبِّ اجْعَل لِّي آيَةً. He said, Lord, appoint then a sign for me. The sign for you, I mean, again, as the Quran says, the sign for you is that for 3 days you will not be able to speak to people except through gestures. Indeed, you will be able to declare the glory and the exaltedness of the Almighty. So you should spend these days thus, and during this time remember your Lord very much and glorify Him morning and evening. So Zacharias wanted a sign of the coming of John, of the coming of Yahya, and he was given this sign, and the sign was that you are not going to speak to people for 3 days, and in these 3 days you must exalt, you must express your gratitude as much as you can to God, because this would be a sign from God that now you are going to be blessed with a child who is going to be your heir, and he's going to carry out, he's going to continue with your legacy. وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاصْطَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ يَا مَرْيَمُ اقْنُتِي لِرَبِّكِ وَاسْجُدِي وَارْكَعِي مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. And remind them also of the incident when the angels said to Mary, Mary, God has selected you and blessed you with purity, and by exalting you above womankind has chosen you for the manifestation of a great sign. So again, as I said earlier on, that this is one of the statures, or this is one of the signs and stations of Mary herself, the way she has been chosen. The Quran has made, it has minced no words by saying, Inna Allah hastafaki wa taharaki wastafaki ala nisa'il alameen, that God has made Mary to be an exalted person. She is going to be someone who is going to be given the best and the topmost status amongst mankind. Istafaki ala nisa'il alameen, all the women of the world, she'll be greatest among them. And then, Ya Maryam uqnuti li rabbiki wasjudi warka'i ma'ar raki'in, remain obedient to your Lord and kneel and prostrate before Him with those who bow before Him. Who bow before Him. So basically, this is how the Quran is expressed, that as far as Mary is concerned, she must be obedient to God. She is someone who will be blessed with a sign from God, referring to Jesus, and she must bow and prostrate herself before the Almighty and remember that this is what her stature is. On such occasions, she must exalt God. And ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ. These are the closing verses of this section, in which is, and this is often the style of the Quran when it makes corrections in the Bible. It says, ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. These are the tales from the unseen, O Prophet, which we are revealing to you. And in reality, you were not present at the time. And what is that time? وَمَا كُنْتَ لَدَيْهِمْ إِذْ يُلْقُونَ أَقْلَامَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ يَكْفُلُ مَرْيَمْ وَمَا كُنْتَ لَدَيْهِمْ إِذْ يَخْتَصِمُونَ. O Prophet, which we are revealing to you, and in reality you were not present at the time when the attendants of the temple were casting lots to decide which of them should have charge of Mary, nor were you present with them when they were having an argument in this matter. So, as we know from the Bible, and of course the Quran is also given its own reference, that the custodianship or the guardianship of Mary was something that was to be determined, because there were a number of claimants to her guardianship, and lots were cast for this, and the lot actually ultimately fell upon Zacharias. So she was given this responsibility, and as the Quran says, ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. So these are the tales of the unseen, these are the tales of ghaib. You were not there, O Prophet. So we are the ones, the Almighty is saying, I am the one who is communicating this to you, which in itself is a very strong proof of your prophethood and your messengerhood. You were not aware of the book of God. You were not fully conversant with reading and writing. So if I or we are communicating these facts to you, this in itself is a huge reasoning and a proof of your own prophethood, that a person who is not even conversant with reading and writing, he is being given this blessing and this station of being the prophet of God and being revealed the true story as far as Jesus and Mary's own mother is concerned. So just to sum up, Mary was expecting a boy. She thought that she would dedicate the child, but when she saw that she has been given a girl, and she said, well, this girl could not have been like that boy. And still she thought, well, whatever God has blessed her with, she should dedicate her to the service of God, which she did. And Zacharias was appointed as her guardian, but not until after this matter reached the case that lots were cast, and they fell upon Zacharias, and he had her guardianship as a result. And this story is going to move on, viewers. Inshallah, we'll look at this story as we move along in our next sessions. And if you have questions, please raise them. Otherwise, I will now start the literal translation of the passage that we have just completed.
Ji, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Shehzad bhai. Shehzad bhai mentioned about the plural alameen, right? And in Arabic, my understanding is, जिस पे आपको opinion चाहिए कि it's used in the sense of plural. That's one way. Another is it's used to, depict majesty, like Mashriqan or Maghriban. There is a third usage, as per my layman understanding, which I heard from Dr. Israr, may Allah be pleased with him, a long time ago. For example, when you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, so he used to say in Urdu, Tamam Jahan Walon ka Rab. In English mein matlab all. Just like here in chapter 3, verse 42, when God says to Mary, Allah Nisa'il Alameen, that we are preferring you over all the women of the world, for Jesus, of course, for showing that ayah. Right. So, does all ye third proper usage have plural ka?
Yes, this is also correct. You see that in that case there would be a suppression of a genitive, so of a governing noun, in fact, and this would be something like Allah Ahlil Alameen, Allah Ahlil Alameen, over all people of the world. So actually, the word is not a single. it's not a standalone word. It has the word Ahl suppressed just before it. So Ahlul Alameen would mean people of the world. But then that is, that's a different scenario. So he's not talking about Alameen. He's just talking about people who live in those Alameen, people who live in that world. So that's not a third meaning actually. So all that he is pointing to is that at times when the Quran is referring towards the world, it is actually referring to the people of the world. So that is what he is explaining, and that is how many other scholars do. But the word Alameen in itself is a plural, and that plural is something which, as I said, either denotes being of a large number or more than one, and it also denotes not majesty, in fact vastness. So Masharik is something which is actually denoting the vastness of the east, and Magharib is the vastness of the west. And there are many other examples that you can see, and if you would like to find out more detail, then there is a book called Asalibul Quran by Ustaz Amiruddin Farai's. I have tried to take most of his examples in my own book, Stylistics of the Quran. It's a chapter in my book, so you can look it up as well. So a number of examples from the Quran have been cited in that book, which will tell you how basically the plural is used to signify the vastness of something. So basically there are two meanings. What Dr. Israr Sahab was referring to is not as much as to the word Alameen as much towards the fact that there is a governing noun suppressed before Alameen, which is Ahlul Alameen.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem.
Sorry, इस वर्स में फिर जरा एक दफा दोबारा बता दें मतलब क्या होगा निसाइल आलमीन का?
All the women of the world. The word here is not referring to all the worlds, like for example there are several worlds, there are several universes. So basically what is being referred to here is all the women of the world. All the women of the world. And Alameen, the plural here, is not referring to all sorts of worlds, but referring to the vastness of this world. So if I translate it to mean that she has been chosen as someone who's superior to all the women of the world, so I can translate it as world, not worlds, not a plural. So we will just translate it as that she's been chosen amongst the top women of the world, of this world that we live in.
at one hand, we say God doesn't go against the Sunnah, the ways He is
God
running
does
the
not
world.
go against the Sunnah. Okay.
Yeah, the way He runs the world. And for
Mm-hmm.
example, we say Miraj is only a dream. Whereas on the other hand, we say Isa alayhi salam born in an exceptional way. This thing
Mm-hmm.
confuses me a lot. Why God will go
Mm-hmm.
against Sunnah here, even while punishing nations like Ad and Samud, God did
Mm-hmm.
natural disasters. Why then in this case he went against
Mm-hmm.
Sunnah?
Actually, this is a very common misconception, and people often cite this word to mean that God does not go against His Sunnah. That is not the correct translation of most of these verses. Wherever they occur, just take them out and study them one by one. Wherever they occur, the words are "Lan tajdala sunnatullahi tabdila," which means that God would not violate His practice. And what is that practice? That practice is mentioned just before those verses, and that is that He sends His messengers in this world. They are given the truth. People who deliberately deny them, they are taken to task and they are punished in this world. This is the practice that is being referred to. The physical law is not the practice which these verses refer to. It is only when you pick up this verse out of context that you think, well, God has a physical law. He has made this world in a certain way. He creates people through genders. People are not born without fathers. So this is how people generally think, because they translate the word sunnah as the physical law of God, as something on which this world has been created. But in the context, if you pick up any of these verses, you'll see that the physical law of God is not being referred to. The practice of God regarding His messengers is being referred to. That He does not change His practice, that whenever He sends a messenger, that messengers come, He delivers the truth, and if that truth is not accepted and people intentionally deny it, then they are accounted for, they are punished in this very world. And this is an established practice of the Prophet, of God, and He never goes against it. So this is the whole translation. The misconception has arisen because we think that the word sunnah refers to physical laws like gravity, or like, for example, that it's through the union of a man or a woman that a child is born. These are not being referred to as the sunnah.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, ये मेरा नेट कुछ प्रॉब्लम कर रहा था, तो जिस वक्त आपने ये बताया कि वो डिवाइन सस्टेनेंस के बारे में, कि जब हजरत जकरिया वहां आते थे तो उनके पास रिस्क का इंतजाम होता था, तो वो मुख्तलिफ तफसीरों में तो है कि बेमौसम के फल होते थे, फ्रूट्स होते थे, तो वो मैं सुन नहीं सकी, वो क्या चीज थी?
So basically, you see, in the Arabic language, the word rizq is not just used for fruits and things like what we consume for our eating. It is also used for divine sustenance. So the word rizq in the Quran has been used for the Quran itself. وَتَجْعَلُونَ رِزْقَكُمْ أَنَّكُمْ تُكَذِّبُونَ. This is how Surah Waqia portrays the word rizq for Quran itself, for divine revelation. You will also find Jesus to be saying that in the Gospels, when He says that man doesn't live by the bread that he eats, he also lives by the sustenance that he receives from God. So the word sustenance does not merely refer to physical sustenance, it also refers to spiritual sustenance, which means divine disclosures, divine manifestations, and of course the fact that she was blessed with these divine words that she must have expressed before Zacharias, and he must have been impressed by that. So basically, the way she would speak to him on behalf of God, or of course she was not a prophet in any way, but she was blessed with this wisdom from God, and that is what she expressed. And that wisdom, the way she would converse with Zacharias, the amount of wisdom that would have, is referred to as rizq. And that is what astounded Zacharias when she said, "Anna laki haza," where have you got this wisdom? How have you acquired this wisdom? And she replied, "Huwa min indillah," it says from God.
Okay, thank you.
Siddiqa Sadiq, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I just want a little bit of a clarification from you, Bhai, about Prophet Zakaria asking for the signs, the nishanis. It just doesn't sit well with me that a prophet of God was unsure whether he was imagining something or something was actually happening.
This is something which is, common at the times of Prophet, because you see, these are the things that that at times, they could have this confusion that maybe this suggestion is coming from some other source and it's not from God Himself. So because of the fact that he was being given this suggestion from the Almighty, he wanted some sign that that could prove that, well, it's not from Satan, not from any evil spirit. Because you see, when prophets of God, they are given such signs, and Zacharias was a ripe old man in his old age. So he just wanted to confirm that how would this happen like this. Of course, the scheme of God could be something, but just to be fully sure, that's how he presented himself, that if he could be given some signs as an assurance. This is much like what happened to Abraham when he said to God, remember, this is what he said in Surah Baqarah, he said that, how do you give life? I would like to know that. And God asked him, don't you believe? He said no, and the word he said, liyatma'inna qalbi, no, I just want that assurance in my heart that I am fully aware that it is from you. Yes, what you are saying is absolutely true. So remember, prophets of God, they are also human beings. They are also people who need assurance. They are also people who need that affection. And you'll find this assurance being sounded to prophets of God on many occasions in the Quran and in the previous scriptures. So this is more like an assurance, not that he was afflicted with any doubt about the power of God. Yes, of course, he knew that God would do it. It was just for his personal satisfaction, as I said, much the way that Abraham had demanded.
Okay, we have a question from Imran. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Just a quick question. One is that, who is Johanna? I mean, I know that Joshua is
John.
also...
Johanna is John.
Okay, so the John the Baptist is also Yahya, and he's also Johanna.
He's also Johanna. And he's the same John. He's the same John. John the Baptist is John, actually.
Right. But why is that in Arabic when it's called Yahya, which means life, whereas we know historically he...
No, that's not correct. Yahya doesn't mean life. I mean, it's a proper noun. People have just conjectured what it means. Otherwise, it's just a proper noun, and it is basically. I mean, if you look at the Hebrew translation, it is much different. It's very different. So when it came into the English language, it went from Greek to Latin to English, and it had a number of changes in its pronunciation. So ultimately, it ended up with John, and this is the same as Yahya in our own language. So that is why we find there are two Johns in the Bible. One is called John the Divine, and the other one is called John the Baptist. And both in the Urdu or in the Eastern languages, in the Bibles of the Eastern languages, that word has traveled from various languages to ultimately then sustain itself or maintain itself in the same state. So it's not that it has come from one language directly into our own language. It has traveled from 2 or 3 other languages and then entered this language.
I see. The last book, which is the Revelations of Johanna, as they call it, is that...
So no, he's a different John. So he's John the Divine. His name, this is John the Baptist that we are talking about. He is the forerunner to Jesus. And then we have another John who is called John the Divine. He's a different John.
Is he the disciple of Jesus?
No. He's basically it's John. I mean, if you're talking about John the disciple, no, he's not the same person. Although I do think, if I recall, that there are people who do regard John the disciple to be the same person, but I cannot say with certainty whether the two are the same. But what I know from certainty and what people have expressed, because the way things are in the Bible, we know John the Baptist was someone who was specially sent as a harbinger, as a person who would herald the arrival of Jesus. Just as Jesus is going to herald the arrival of Muhammad, so there was this prediction which was found regarding Jesus in the ancient scriptures, that he is not an unintroduced personality. He will be introduced by previous prophets, and there will be a prophet before him by the name of John who will come and announce his arrival. So basically they were awaiting his arrival because John was someone who was already in their scriptures, he was a person who would be heralding the arrival of Jesus. So this is how John has been mentioned. So remember, one thing that the whole Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible is both things are present, and that is that all the prophets of God, including the prophet of the Israelites, the lesser prophets as they are called, they are ones who are introduced earlier on by previous prophets, so that they don't come as a surprise to people. They are introduced personalities. And in the case of the Israelites, this would often happen, that the next prophet would be living and he would give that baptism. I mean, the leaving prophet would baptize the new prophet, and both would be, they would be contemporaneous. They would be living in the same era. So it's not that the one would die and the next one would come. So in the case of the Israelites, they were all contemporaneous, that the next prophet would often be living in the time of the previous prophet, and the previous prophet would baptize the next prophet, that now he is going to continue with my task. So this is how things were. But as I said, as we move along, this had to change, and because of the fact that Jesus was to be the last prophet amongst the Israelites, and he had to really shake and jolt them, he was given special miracles. So his arrival was, it was something that was sounded much before, so that people are actually, just as people were waiting for the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, so they were also waiting for the arrival of Jesus, because John was continuously talking about him.
The Quran says, "Khalafahum ba'dam khalf," like, the prophets were followed by other prophets. Like Moses had Joshua student.
Yeah.
Right. So like Moses had Joshua with him as a student, but
so Joshua was not a prophet. So remember, Joshua is not a prophet. Joshua was just a student or a disciple of Moses.
I see. So he didn't end up becoming
He was not a
Yusha bin
prophet.
Nun. Yusha bin Nun never became.
No, they were not prophets. They were his disciples. These were the two people who stayed with him, Caleb and Joshua. They were the ones who said that, well, we will be with you if you decide to invade Jerusalem, which was the command of God. But the rest of the Israelites said, "Fazhab anta wa rabbaka faqatila." You go with your God and you fight with these. We are going to stay here. So the only two people that were, of the same opinion and they followed Moses were Caleb and Joshua.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's the name they call it, Caleb bin Yohanna, I think. Also, I could be wrong there.
Oh, no, it's Joshua and Caleb. They are two different people.
Right,
so
they're two people.
I
was just saying that Caleb's full name is Caleb bin Yohanna. I think I have heard somewhere, but I could be wrong, sir.
I don't think so. I haven't heard Caleb in Caleb, son of Joshua of no. Maybe you need to double check. Otherwise, he's more famous by the name Caleb.
Thank you for that. Shiraz Ahmed, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you, sister. Shehzad bhai, earlier on, Siddiqa, sister, asked you a question about, when Hazrat Zakaria al-Islam was asking for a nishani, for a sign, right? And you gave an example of Ibrahim, and there are other examples like Ibrahim in Quran, where a prophet was passing by a valley, and it was a city that was torn apart, and he asked God, how are you going to raise these people from the dead? And then he went to sleep, blah, blah, blah. But in my mind, I have the same question as Siddiqa, but the reason that I cannot reconcile the two incidents, because Hazrat Ibrahim was not in doubt. He clearly said that I believe in what you say. I'm just curious about how you're going to do it. There's a difference over here that Hazrat Zakaria al-Islam is not saying that, hey, I'm not in doubt. I just want to know how you're going to do it. Ghamidi Sahib in his tafsir commentary has said that he asked for a sign, and Ustad can be wrong, right? But I want to know your viewpoint about it, that he asked for a sign because he wanted to make sure whether whatever he heard was from God through angels or it was just his own imagination. And this is what kind of, make me wonder that if a prophet is not 100% sure and needs a sign, whether he's receiving a revelation or some third party or intruder is communicating with him, how can we be sure about the rest? So do you understand my confusion that I don't?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that this is a very important area, that of course the fact that if he is being communicated something, so remember there are two things. There is one thing which is called revelation, in which some inspiration is sent to you in the form of words and it becomes the scripture, and then you deliver that guidance to people. So this is one area of prophethood, and that is precisely why they are called prophets. And then there is another area in which there's some instruction is to be made to them. They are educated. They are made to be people who understand that at times God works in His own ways. So this is more related to their own instruction, instead of being a divine inspiration relating to guidance being provided to other people. This part of the Quran, or this part of Zacharias being given these glad tidings of a child, is something that he himself was, I mean, he could not grasp it, that how God, against the fact that he's grown old in his life and he's going to give him a child. Yes, of course, the power of God is something that can do anything. But I think it's just the human part of being a prophet that needed that assurance. And that human part is something that never subtracts itself from any prophet of God. All prophets are human beings as well. So I do think that this was more of that human part speaking, not the prophet part itself, in which he thought, well, that now he's being given these glad tidings of a child in his age. And maybe this, because physically this never happens, that you are blessed with a child. Remember, this is exactly what Mary, I mean, as we go on in the next verses, I think the next paragraph, you'll find that when she was given these glad tidings, he said that, how can I have a child when no person has touched me? Lam yamsasni bashar. And the reply was, Kala kazalik Allah yafalu ma yasha, that God does what he wants to. So basically this question is more about the physical laws which confound a person, because according to those physical laws, unless someone touches someone, unless, I mean, there is this a contact between two people, men and women, how can a child be born? So this is more a question of this sort. And Zacharias also had this similar question, that in his old age, how could he given a son? And he's just thought that, well, this might be an information that he's not fully reconciled to, because normally children are not born in this age. And if this is sort of a miracle that he's receiving, he would like some more assurance. So I do think that this is his human part that was speaking, and it related more to the physical part, I mean the physical laws of those times, of all times, I would say.
Thank you, Shehzad. Excellent. So if I summarize it, sometimes the human aspect, prophets are human, we know that, but sometimes they show this humanity, whether it's out of curiosity or it's out of wonder, or they're too surprised, they just need extra storage. It's just like Prophet Abraham's wife, when 3 angels stole.
Exactly, that also shows. Yeah. So we have to remember that prophets of God are human beings as well. Yes, they are guided by God, but that human element always stays with them, and that human element makes them worry. So remember, this is how the mother of Moses, and we know from the Quran, she was sent a revelation from God, and she said, and God said to her that, don't worry, I'll return him to you one day. You just put him in the basket and let it flow in the river. And in Surah Qasas, God says that had it not been this assurance that God had given her, she would have been totally floored, because how could she have consigned her own son in a basket and just and let him loose in the waves of the sea? So these are God's ways to assure people, and by the same token, we are made to understand this, that in spite of being prophets of God, in spite of being righteous people, in spite of being recipients of God's assurance and revelation, they are still human beings. And God addresses all that, those aspects as well.
Thank you very much, Shehzad. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. Akram Bhatti Saab, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamualaikum, sir. So today's discussion actually confused me in my mind in a couple of ways. One, that John the Baptist. And if he is the same person, we call Hazrat Yahya al-Islam, who was born to Zachariah. Actually, Zachariah...
No. Zacharias is the father of John the Baptist.
Yeah, Zachariah is the father, because when he saw Hazrat Maryam al-Islam, and he got inspired by that, and he prayed God to have a son. So then this is the same John who baptized Isa al-Islam. They will not be.
Yes, the same. Yes, he's the same person. That's why he's called John the Baptist.
Okay, so
that is precisely why. That is precisely why he's called John the Baptist.
But when you're talking earlier about other John, I got confused. John the...
No, that is a different John. He's called John the Divine. And to him is attributed the last book of the Bible, which is called the Book of Revelations.
He came after this John or before this John?
That I am not very sure of. I think we need to do a little more research. Maybe you can look it up, but I do know that these are two separate people.
That's what I got confused about. And one more small question that I got confused about was about that story of the donkey and the person. Was that Ezra?
No, yes, most probably.
Yeah.
That's a different prophet. He's another prophet. And
yeah, I know, but today we had so many decisions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so many scholars think that he was actually Ezra.
Ezra, okay, yeah. So I got confused. All this long discussion today.
So these are all different people. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that. So we have a question in the chat. Dr. Saleem, what is baptized and how did the Israelite prophets do it?
So baptism is like an authority given to the next prophet that now you are in charge after me. Now you are given this divine role of being a prophet after me. So God communicates this to his prophet. I mean, this is what happened in the times of the Israelite prophets, that every departing prophet, he would baptize the new prophet. He would sort of give him the authority. He would hand over the baton to him that now I am leaving and now in my place you are being appointed as the prophet of God. This is what baptism was. And about Jesus himself, he's Masiullah. He's someone who was baptized by God, because of course no one could have baptized him. So it is this expression which God has said that it's God who has baptized Jesus himself, as he's being sanctioned as the prophet of God. So I mean, this is something which I just wanted to add. Otherwise, baptism is something in which the previous prophet was given this authority. I mean, the previous prophet would give this authority to the next prophet that now you are in charge.
Okay. We have a question. Riaz Khan, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Saleem, Doc. I just have some confusion between the relationship between Zakaria, Yahya, and Imran, his wife, and Maryam. So what is the relevancy here of Yahya in this story?
The relevancy here is because he is the one who foretold the arrival of Jesus, and this is something which was known to them. So they were waiting for the arrival of Jesus. I just explained this, that just as Prophet Muhammad's arrival was being expected in Arabia, because Jesus had foretold about him 500 years ago. So in the Bible also, and the righteous Christians of those times, they were waiting for the arrival. They were waiting for the arrival of Muhammad. So the Christians too were foretold many years before that there is going to be Jesus coming. And that prediction actually said that John would be foretelling the arrival of Jesus. So we have this whole genre of prediction literature or prophecies being mentioned in the previous scriptures. And these prophecies were being carried down verbally and scripturally, introducing the arrival of Jesus, so that they would be forewarned that, well, the prophet about whom you are being foretold, you had been foretold many years ago, is now arrived, because his arrival is being now predicted and prophesied by John, who was supposed to predict him. So it's like telling us that, well, he was not an unintroduced person. He was not someone who just took them by surprise. He was someone who basically was being awaited.
Okay. Ustadji, in the history, for the question how absolute knowledge is obtained, Muhaddisin state a particular number of narrators is required in Isnad. And Usulijin state uncountable number of people is required in every generation. My question is, what tools or rules Western historians have to claim about something is no more a presumptive knowledge, but absolute? Also recommend some of the books to know about the rules.
So you see, as far as our Western historians are concerned, they don't think that anything occupies a state of non-presumptive knowledge or certain knowledge unless you have relics of those period, manuscripts of those period, or any other sign of that. Maybe they might come from excavation. You might dig something and you'll find something. So unless you have a visual proof in the form of a manuscript or an artifact or some other contraption that you might dig from the ground, they will not regard it to be, because they don't believe in anything that we call established history in the form of tawatur. The word tawatur is missing from their whole study of history. So they regard history to be presumptive, and only that part to be certain about which there is some visual proof or something that you can observe with your eyes, like, as I said, a relic or a manuscript or something that you can find about that particular nation. If you're asking for a book, well, there are so many books that have been written by Western scholars. I exactly might not be remembering their names, but I think I did make a list once, because I had to do this work to work out how these Western historians study history and what to them is certain and what to them is uncertain. So maybe if you can write to me, I could give you that list, because I have that list lying with me somewhere.
Thank you for a wonderful session, Dr. Saleem. We are all out of time. Thank you. And there are no more questions at this time.